Here we are in Laodicea.
This is my presentation a couple weeks ago. We always start here at this sign, and it was sort of an academic, thing. Look, you look devastating earthquakes, and you read this and say, "Oh wow, how bad!" And then a devastating earthquake happens, and this becomes more than dates on a board. It becomes the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds, and even millions of people that are affected by that. And what they did in cities in Asia Minor, even back then. So we have, basically three in the biblical period. There's another one, 17, that we'll talk about related to Philadelphia. It probably had some effect here in this city, but the really bad one was in 60, when there was tremendous damage done in the city. And then, of course, as a result of this final one, they just abandoned the city, and then they moved to found the city south of modern Denise.
Yesterday, I showed his huge statue in the museum. So what he did, he created some cities, and those cities we called Alexandrias. Several Alexandrias, and according to historians, it says 18 different Alexandrias existed. So when he passed away, his generals, they took their control of their own kingdoms, and built everything on their own. And what they did, they also started to build the cities. And those guys, the Seleucid kingdom, they created the famous city of Antioch. 16 different areas. There is the Antioch of Mandrum, which is located nearby the Mandarin, the wife of Antiochus II. So he named after his wife. It's a nice gift. It was a rich city because of the cotton fields. You saw how fertile this area is. So they had lots of richness. They were selling some kind of powder for the illnesses. They were making money, lots of money. They said, no, we don't need your help. We can easily rebuild our city with our own richness. They almost refused the help.
Entering into Laodicea.
Where that graffito of Philip was?
Yes.
It's right here. So what we have here is evidently somebody from Hierapolis was in the city, and it's very difficult to see, but he's carved a structure looking very similar to the martyrium in Hierapolis that we'll see later, and then put in Greek Philippos on it. So that's where this graffito is on this column right here. A pillar in the temple. It's archaeologically, architecturally speaking, not a good translation. We could refer to these as columns, not pillars.
In 2003, it was almost entirely unknown and underground. They've excavated the whole thing in the past 20 years. Wow, in the distance, those columns. Incredible. It's unbelievable. Seen in the distance, those pillars, it's crazy.
Now, what's significant about this, while they were excavating the Nymphaeum over there, the fountain, they found these column fragments that were there. A totally unique archaeological piece that we got here in Turkey. So when we talk about biblical interpretation of the nuances of the various things that have to be brought to bear, here we have a good example of archaeological interpretation of the material culture of something that's been found. So we're going to ask you some questions. So there's at least three interpretations of what this means. So you have the very typical Jewish symbol here with the menorah, with the flames coming out the top, the shofar, the ram's horn on this side, the lulav here. for years it just laid here without the bottom, then they rejoined it. You can see the three stand of the menorah here, plus just the bottom of the etrog, the citron fruit here. So these are very typical iconographic symbols of Judaism we find all over here in Asia Minor. So this, and then of course we see the cross with the round globus on top. So, is this a friendly symbol? Is this a hostile symbol? What do you think? How are you going to interpret this?
Do we know what year it was from?
So do you think these were carved by the same hand?
No.
Okay, why not?
The cross is much deeper.
The cross is much deeper, much more precise. Yeah, so this bit here would be the same as that. It was the same hand.
Okay, so we have two different dates. Okay, probably two different hands. So we make those kind of interpretive remarks, observations as we're looking at it. Most of our Jewish symbolism dates that we find here to at the earliest like this. So any further comments? Friendly or hostile?
Hostile.
Okay, why?
Because the cross is on top of the Judeo side.
Okay.
Like we're
Now, if it was only on top, it could be friendly, but is it more intrusive than being on top?
It's taking the middle.
dividing the menorah.
Right. I mean, he damaged the central arms of the menorah have been damaged with the globus here. So it was on top. That would be sitting up here. Okay. So if I was going to interpret this as friendly, I would think that they would have moved the cross higher, so the two are together. The common trope is that all the religions got along, then and now. Well, that's not the case. We have the mosaic of all the cultures that everybody lived happily ever after, then and now. Well, that's not the case. So Steve Pine, who's a friend, a Jewish scholar, brought him here, and of course his immediate response was, this is an early example, a visual example of supersessionism, of the triumph of Christianity over Judaism. And he published that in an article, and
Wow.
That's really clear, isn't it?
would meet in the theater for their meetings, their ecclesia. So ecclesia, which we translate as church, is a Greek civic term. So the only place we have it in the New Testament in its Greek civic sense is in Acts chapter 19. They are in the theater where the demas would meet, and the town clerk says this is an illegal ecclesia. This is an illegal assembly. So the church later uses the term. So the boule meets in a structure called a bulletarian, and we will see some of these. And these are the civic of the Laodiceans, and they erected this.
Working on glass.
This is odd.
Oh, it feels uncomfortable. It's a long way down there.
So why is it?
I don't know.
You can walk, it's safe, it's broken only 3 times.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the height of those things.
You're still videoing.
Yeah, the major point is when we talk about basilica, it's actually a Roman architectural style. It was a 3-aisle meeting room. We'll see an example of that in Ephesus. And because it's a very functional style, the early Christians were meeting in homes simply because that was what it was necessary. There's nothing romantic about house churches, okay, as opposed to meeting here. I think sometimes we sort of romanticize a house church movement as more New Testament than actually building a building. The Christians much more pragmatic. As the church grew, there's not room in houses anymore. So using a basilica structure like this after Christianity is legalized, they began to do this because the congregations could come together. So you can the Eastern churches were Greek speaking.
Yeah.
So much later that historically in his church history that
So what year again?
well, you don't have till what was it, 1066 that the schism happened, something
No,
like
that's invasion of England.
Oh, they're done. But
It's the altar. Some baptistry here.
with the apse areas to the east, baptistries are always off to the side. We'll see one of these in Ephesus as well. Steps going in like this. So is it a combination of course, people are shorter back in the day too, of self immersion and then water over the top. So
This is 5th century probably, right? And a lot of time on the floor.
Okay, friends. We'll just stop here.
This is a big site.
It is a big site, so you can imagine the guy is sending an email. They're saying we will call you or we will send you an email once it's sent to you.
That is huge.
It's a ways down there.
Oh man. Oh my cow.
It's located on the western edge of the
So
city.
this one holds 12,000
Northern
people.
part, this is northern theater and the western theater. So now we will walk the western one, and on our way we will see the agora and the wall, and we will see the one which is excavated and reconstructed. By seeing this, again, those are your memorable pictures, because in the future, if they restaurate this theater, you can say that I saw this theater without anything. Yeah, this is the first time you're using it. They have two. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there are 4 agoras, and one is the one that we can see here, which is it's unusually big. In the terms that in some sites it says that this is the largest agora, or this is the second largest agora of the country.
Noah looks like. So when you read about where the early church gathered in Jerusalem, they met in the Solomon's porch or portico. The Greek word there is stoa. Okay, protection from the sun in the rain and from the rain in the winter time. So very functional. Those of you going on the greens.
Yeah. We're getting left behind. Huh? Look how big those columns are.
Hey, so this is Laodicea right here, and we're looking at one of the 4 agoras, which is, I learned today, is a meeting place. It's an open air meeting place, not a marketplace necessarily. It could be a marketplace, but this is like 150 yards at least of a pool that they had to refresh themselves. The pillars are super tall. This is, I'm guessing, oh man, 5 football fields in size. If you put end to end like this, this is pretty just remarkable. Laodicea was very rich and they had an earthquake in 60 AD and refused the government's money to rebuild because they thought they could do it on their own, and they did. So that's probably the background for the Laodicean letter that John is writing. He said, "You think you have need of nothing, but you are naked, blind, poor, wretched," all of that. So this is remarkable.
Wow, this is a restored amphitheater.
And once they found the theaters, it's on this.
Seats 8,000. Oh my goodness.
Now we see the reconstruction of the museum. So this is a reconstruction, especially the Tutku Tours. They put some new marble pieces. You can easily distinguish the difference. Okay, but it was all covered by.
So this is the smaller theater at Laodicea. It's supposed to seat 8,000. I don't know. It looks pretty big to me. But it's a good ways down there, probably. I don't know. I can't even 60, 75, 100 feet maybe. But it's pretty spectacular. They had to dig this out of the side of the hill and build this. The site is pretty mind-blowing. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty nice too. So they restored all that.
Wow. You still got a big.
So the impression that we get from the ancient world is all these white columns, everything was just kind of a monotone look, but they were very colorful. And you can see from the paintings that they were to restore these very bright colors with reds, yellows, and whatnot. And we know, and maybe Cenk pointed this out in the museum, statues were painted as well. They were actually quite gaudy. The visual world in antiquity was very, very colorful. We think, oh, what a beautiful white column. Well, it wasn't like that necessarily.
We worked long time with the Italians. The Italians, they hate to use any cement and during the reconstruction.
Why?
Right. I mean,
Why? I mean, they have to, don't they? Oh, well.
Colors are amazing up in there.
They just clean out some parts are original, some parts are artificial pieces.
demonstration here. Some people interpret it Christian, I don't.
What do you mean game board?
We will see that.
Okay.
Here's a pool.
That's a good 3 feet. So that wall went all the way down there where those pillars are.
Right.
All the way down.
Still working.
God.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this was the top. This was covered like this.
The dirt that they take off.
Lots of
This is painstaking work, man.
Especially since it's like a quarter of a mile over to the other edge.
But this is a Christian has done this with the hero, first two letters of Christ, and Alpha and Omega.
Right.
Then these are just to play games.
Yeah.
They subsidized those because this is 2003 they started. Today's government came to the power in 2002. This means they
It
had
goes a long way that way too.
and
The main shopping area, town entry. Okay, here I am looking out of Laodicea. Massive amounts of stuff. 20 years ago it was not even excavated.